Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Administration for Native Americans webinar series, Crafting a Problem Statement. I'm glad to have you all here with us this morning. So first, I'd like to give you a quick introduction to some BB Collaborate user tools. For those of you using your microphones and headsets, we do have an audio setup wizard, which is the microphone with the red sundial on it. Use this feature, click on that, and you can set up your headset and microphone to speak and talk. When we go to leave the teleconference today, if you would please press File and then select Exit to exit the room. That will close out the system on your computer. We have a set of quick response and polling that we are going to use today a little bit later in the webinar, and we used it a little bit earlier when I did a mic check, so that was great. There's also a set of whiteboard tools for writing and typing responses right on the whiteboard. Some of you may have seen me using that a little bit this morning as we were getting ready to get started. I'm not going to have you use that, but I will be placing some information on the whiteboard later. And for you today, we have the chat box feature where you can type in here to ask questions, and we will do our best to respond to them, as well as if you're having some other difficulties with anything, we have a technology person in the background that will be monitoring that chat box for you. Today, the Alaska Region TTA Center is hosting this webinar. Our staff consists of the Regional Director, Anthony Kaoli, myself, the Training and Technical Assistance Manager, Angela Camus, our Technology and E-Outreach Manager, Charles Peel, who's in the background monitoring today, as well as a pool of professional consultants with various levels of expertise available to assist you. The Alaska Region TTA Center, as well as all of the TTA centers, provides free training in project planning and development, pre-application, and post-award. Additionally, we all provide free technical assistance for your project planning and development, pre-application development. We provide technical assistance on-site to grantees once they've been awarded. There's unfunded technical assistance available, as well as other grantee technical assistance throughout the life of your grant. You can find information about the Alaska region at www.anaalaska.org. I encourage you to go there, click around a little bit. Additionally, you will find past webinars that you can search for on this website. We offer a Google Communities for collaborating and sharing resources with other tribes and organizations, both nationally and regionally, and that's at gplus.to/ANAalaska. And we encourage you to go and connect with others, especially in the language community there. Talk with others, ask some questions, and share your resources. Additionally, there is many resources available on the National ANA website at www.acf.hhs.gov/ANA, including a whole host of upcoming trainings and webinars. ANA is all about promoting the self-sufficiency for Native Americans by providing discretionary grant funding for community-based projects and training and technical assistance to eligible tribes and Native organizations. And ANA's vision is that Native communities are thriving. As I mentioned, the events page at ANA has many of the upcoming webinars, additionally trainings. You can also find some of the past webinars there. Some of the upcoming webinars will be measuring project outcomes, how to measure positive changes. That will be hosted by the Western region, February 13th. The next one is native language instruction in early childhood settings, and that will be hosted by the Eastern region on February 20th. And what to expect when applying electronically, that will be hosted by the Pacific region on February 27th. The start times for the webinars, we're all hosted on Thursdays, and of course it's 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Alaska time, and 10 a.m. Hawaii time during standard time zone. Today we have a couple of goals. One is to understand the big picture of where the problem statement fits in and why it's important, to understand what a problem statement is, and having a sense of how to craft and refine the problem statement that you have currently developed. So the problem statement is key to your application. It tells the reader what is important to you, what you're trying to solve, and it has that impact of importance and urgency. I don't know if anyone out there sews and beads, but have you ever tried to do that with a dull needle? The problem statement is like the needle of your application, and all of the rest of the parts and pieces are sewn together with it. So then the problem statement needs to be sharp and crisp and clear and have a very specific direction for your application. It is linked to the project goal. So the problem statement is the problem, and the project goal is how you're going, is what the result is that will be solved. And that is taking you one step closer to the long-range community goal, which is the utopia for your community. If your community was the best that it could be and everything was in a perfect state, this is where you're headed. But remember that this project goal is only taking you one step closer. And the problem statement is the larger problem within the community. The objectives are the steps that you take to solve the problem, to reach the project goal, to get to that long-range community goal. The activities, this is the steps that you take to obtain your objectives, to solve your problem, to reach your goal, to get your community to a much better place. So again, this is why it is so important. This is how it fits in, and this is why you want it to be clear and concise. So your problem statement determines what it is you're trying to solve, what's going on in your community. We want the problem statement to be a clear, concise statement, allowing you and others to know what you're trying to work for. It's something that you're trying to solve in the near to immediate future. However, the problem statement should not have statements of lack or need. Remember, this is not your solution, your goal, your purpose, or your topic. For example, you can have a topic of a school dropout rate. That's an overall topic. The problem, when more defined, is that students in grades 9 through 12 are not motivated and they're dropping out. A solution would be that you're trying to determine and promote factors to motivate students to stay in school. So your solutions are based on the needs assessment that you have performed in your community or target. Quite often we identify what we believe to be the solution of the problem without reaching out to others for their input. Remember, this input is vitally important. These are community problems and with looking for community solutions. But the problem itself should, and the problem statement should not host this potential solution. One of the ways that you can determine and help develop the beginning phases of your problem statement is by developing a problem tree. So the first thing is maybe you've settled on a core problem, such as that school dropout rate. You begin to identify the causes, and then lastly, identify the effects. So based on the resources available to you, it may not be feasible to address all of the causes and all of the effects within this project. Remember, this project only has a limited amount of funding available to it, and it is going to reach a few objectives, reach a very specific goal, and take you one step closer to solving the overall problem. So with this tree, you can look at potential interventions and solutions. And those are larger topics that will be covered in a couple other webinars looking at your outcomes and the solutions. So I encourage you to attend that. There's some criteria that a problem statement should have. We want the problem statement to be concise, 1 or 2 sentences at the most. You'll have a whole paragraph or two to describe the problem statement in further detail. Again, remember, you want your problem statement to be specific and show urgency. You want it to demonstrate that you have an understanding of the problem and who you seek to serve. You're demonstrating that you have some knowledge of some interventions. You're demonstrating that yours is the same issues that your funder wants to address, and you're laying the groundwork for your reader and the funder towards the conclusion of your approach and clearly one of the best possible choices to address the problem. And so that comes in the paragraph after the actual statement. The problem statement itself, you want it to be specific and address one problem. Remember, it ties to the big picture. You don't want your reader to be guessing about where you're going. You want them to easily understand what problem you are trying to solve. If they guess that you're trying to solve one problem while you're really trying to solve another, for example, if they think you're trying to build something and you're really trying to create a project, a program, they will be reading your application with a different lens and they'll be confused. So we're looking for that clarity. You want your problem statement to be measurable. How severe is the problem? What is the frequency, or how many people are affected by this particular issue? So you can include things like community demographics, workforce statistics, substance abuse rates, income levels, poverty rates, turnover rates. But one of the keys when you're using this is that rather than using national levels, you want to use community-driven rates. And how did you find them? You want to ensure that the problem is not too big to be solved with the proposed project. You can take actions to solve the problem at this time within the time frame of the proposed project. You may not solve all of the unemployment rate, but you may be able to reduce it so that a solution is achievable. For example, keeping it more narrowed, instead of just saying that there's a loss of language in the community, narrow it to children between the ages of 5 and 9 have lost our language or have no fluency in our language. So something like that. You begin to narrow the problem statement. This helps make it solvable within the time frame that you're looking at. So a couple of tips when you're writing your problem statement is to think about the fact that you are writing this for someone who knows nothing about your topic, your organization, your community, your tribe. Avoid using technical jargon and acronyms within your problem statement so that it is very specific. In this particular instance, don't spell out the numbers in this section of your proposal. For example, don't spell out the number 2, use the number 2. Don't spell out 54, use the number 54, and so on. And do not mention your program activities in this section, but prove that your problem and the need. So a few steps as you're developing your problem statement. You want to write down your problem and not focus on the quality of the initial statement. This helps your team just have a general idea and a better understanding of the problem that you're looking for, and you begin to find more information. Once you have that general statement, then begin to ask some questions about the problem statement that you just wrote. Who does it or does it not affect? So you want to go through the who, what, how, when, and where questions. When is it a problem and when is it not a problem? And when you have crafted some of this information, then from that you can rewrite your problem statement using those criteria we talked about earlier, that it's concise, specific, measurable, and solvable. And we're going to look at a problem statement here in a moment. And the first problem statement that we're going to put up for you is a sample of a poorly written problem statement, and then we're going to change to one that is rewritten for improvement. Additionally, we have a couple of exercises that we're going to go through with you and allow you to answer a few questions. We're going to do some polling and get you to tell us if you think that these problem statements have this, if they're concise or specific, measurable, and solvable. And then we're also going to put up a slightly rewritten. I want you to understand that these are not meant to be perfect examples because they are not in the context of a full community need and proposed project. So we are just using some things to give you an example of how you start and begin to craft. Remember that there are many ways to write these problem statements, and it will all depend on the actual issues within your community, what your community is facing, and how you are looking to solve this, as well as how the community is choosing to solve it. That will help assist you with what information you will focus on in your actual problem statement. And this is where knowing your community and knowing your project plays a very important role. Once you have gone through this process and refined your problem statement, ask someone else who doesn't know your project to take a look at it, give you feedback, or contact your regional TTA provider for some additional assistance. So let's go ahead and get started. An initial problem statement. The problem that this project addresses is our community's high unemployment rate. It is clear that our community members are suffering economically as a result of unemployment, and we believe that many of the other problems that our community members experience, poverty, broken and single-family homes, overcrowded and subsidized housing, drug and alcohol abuse, and domestic violence, are caused by unemployment. As you can see, this brings in many topics and subjects. And while we say that we're going to focus on unemployment, by the time we get to the end, the reader might be thinking, is that really all they're trying to solve? As we move forward in rewriting this, a new problem statement might be the Flat Top Center is currently limited in its ability to assist the community with its 53% unemployment rate. Our community's unemployment rate is also closely tied to our household poverty rate of 41%, with 71% of the children and families having incomes at or below the poverty level. We've added some measurables, and we've said that this is our community's unemployment rate. So again, we didn't use that national average. We've tied this high unemployment rate to other large issues within our community. It is beginning to look towards a solution, but what we're saying is that we believe that this unemployment rate, if worked on, would also affect other rates. In the paragraphs that follow, we might explain that some more. However, this initial statement with 53% unemployment allows this statement to have some impact and clarity. Again, remember that this is going to depend on your community, and this problem statement could be written several ways depending on the actual project that you're going to work on. So we're going to go ahead and put up 3 different statements, problem statements, and ask you a few questions. I'd like you to use your polling button, which is over above your name, and there's a hand and there's a check mark. We're going to ask that you respond using the check mark with a yes or no. So our first problem statement, let us know what you think about this. The Caribou tribe is rapidly losing its culture and has one of the highest teen suicide rates in the country. The tribe lacks youth programs that reconnect them to cultural knowledge and practices and a safe environment for counseling distressed youth. So how many of you think that this is a concise problem statement? Two. Okay. Correct. This is not one of our more concise statements. What about measurable? Are there measurables in here for the severity of the problem? Great. Right, there is not. And so as we look at this, I'm hoping this is giving you a little bit better idea of where we are looking at this. And to give you an idea of how this could potentially be rewritten, I'm going to try to get this on the board here. Hoping this is big enough for you. So we wrote this a little bit. The Caribou tribe's teen population of 529 youth ages 13 to 16 is experiencing a rise in the suicide rate with an average of 3 to 4 per year. These same youth are showing a steady decline in cultural knowledge with less than 10% aware of our songs and dances. So as you can see, we've added some quick measurables. It is more specific as we've added the age group of the actual youth that we're speaking of and the teens. We've narrowed that to ages 13 to 16, making this more specific as well. Again, you can continue to work this problem statement as you go ahead and refine your project. Remember to come back to your problem statement and see if it is still as sharp or if you'd like to be able to make it sharper. Okay, another problem statement. The Bella tribe has no private sector economy and an extremely high unemployment rate, 3 times the national average. To develop private sector job opportunities, the tribe needs funding to complete the renovation of the old boarding school into a lodge for housing sports fishermen and bird watchers. Currently, our tribal members lack the skills to run a tourism business and need training to learn accounting and tourism. So how many of you think that they're pretty much looking for some construction money? when you first read that? Nobody? Oh, here we go. Yeah, a couple folks. Okay. Sorry, there's a little delay. Thank you for your answers. And then how many folks thought maybe they were looking for money to train individuals and tribal members for jobs? Okay. And how many people thought maybe they were looking for both? Great. So as you can see by the various answers that we got, there's a lack of some specificity and clarity. So when reading the rest of the application, if you thought they were only looking for money for construction and renovation, which remember, ANA doesn't fund construction, you're going to have a different lens as you read, and then your reader is going to be confused. And so we're looking again to make this a little more clear and rewriting it. See if I can make it a little bigger this time for ease of eyes. So now rewritten, the Bella tribe has an alarming unemployment rate of 63%. The community's job market is struggling due to its remote location and few local businesses to provide jobs. We have taken this and added some specificity, took out the funding construction for renovation because that's an activity or a small piece of this project. What this community is really suffering is an unemployment rate of 63%. And their job market is in trouble. So we've added the measurable of a community unemployment rate of 63%. This also takes this statement and shows how important it is for this community to create a change and to solve this problem. It also tells us that the job market is limited within this community. Now, it also begins to lend the idea that there's a chance that we're going to solve some unemployment and potentially try to find a way for jobs. And again, this is going to depend on what your community needs to focus on. If in fact the community had been looking to complete renovation with, because they're just going to house some folks, that would be a whole different project than what they were actually looking for, which was to work on the unemployment rate within the community. Okay, our last one. The Sea Cliff tribe is struggling to preserve its culture and language. There are only 10 Sea Cliff elders who are first language speakers, 8 speakers with varying levels of fluency, and no one under 30 who has any level of Sea Cliff language proficiency. Without an active language program in the schools, the Sea Cliff language will be lost within 10 to 15 years. So, how many of you think that this holds all of the pieces that we're looking for? That it's concise, it is specific, that it's measurable, and that it is solvable? Great. This This one is a fairly well-written problem statement. And as you can see, they already started with some of the measurables that they were looking to achieve and the problem, or some of the measurables of the problem within the community. And it shows that they are struggling and that there is some importance within this. And so as this was worked on, it was improved by adding some urgency into the statement, which, sorry. And taking that last sentence that says that the language will be lost in 10 to 15 years and bringing that to the top. And so starting with the importance of the problem that they are facing. It is projected that the Seacliff language will be lost within the next 10 to 15 years. That is the sharpness of the focus. And then we brought in the Seacliff tribe only having the 10 elders who are first language speakers, along with the low to medium level of fluency and the age of and those under the age of 30, not having this other level of language proficiency. In doing that, we have made it slightly more concise and provided the opportunity for the problem statement to have a greater impact. So instead of 3 sentences, we brought it down to just 2, and we left out that they're struggling to preserve the culture and language. We can move that to a sentence in the explaining paragraphs that would follow outside of the problem statement itself. And so that is how you can take a good problem statement and make it better, by increasing that conciseness, providing a bit more specificity to it. And then again, this shows that as you know more about your project and you move further along, that there's an opportunity to craft this even farther. I hope that these have helped you today in looking at how you can work through your problem statement, how some of that change begins to happen as you're writing your application, a little bit of hands-on change, providing the questions to ask, remembering that those are the who, what, where, when, and how. Who is it affecting, how, and where, so that you bring these problem statements back into line and that they're measurable, specific, and concise. At this time, we're going to open the floor for some questions and answers, as well as we would like to ask that you would fill out an evaluation form while we're going through some questions and answers. And you can type your questions in the chat box below. Again, we want to thank you for coming today as well. I see it looks like a couple people might be typing, so we'll wait for questions. I know the problem statements can be difficult to craft. Again, it's about knowing your project, looking at the audience and your community. I do highly encourage you to call each of your regional TTA centers and ask them to take a look at your problem statement, help you run through the steps again to provide some clarity while you're working through this. Are the webinar slides available? Yes, we will mail out a PDF version of this to everyone who attended today. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us. Again, I want to encourage you to fill out the problem statement evaluation form, and I hope that you have a fabulous day. Thank you, Nora.